Welcome everybody, afternoon. Welcome to this London HR Connection webinar. Our subject today is on driving tangible engagement through effective well-being. I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating session. Before we start, just a couple of admin things, just to say this session is being recorded, so hope you're all happy with that. We'll be making the recording available to all participants after the webinar. Your microphones will be muted during this webinar. We have a large number of people joining. We do encourage you to use the chat function, which some of you already discovered, and also to submit questions using the Q&A function. Certainly during the webinar itself, and also at the end, we've got a Q&A session specifically. So please do put your questions through. We want to make it very participative. The sort of formal session will last about 45 minutes, and then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. For those of you who haven't met before, I'm Craig McCoy. I'm the chair of London HR Connection. I've had that role for the last 7 years or so. I also am a senior HR director, have been for my sins for about 35 years, doing a number of different roles. I think 16 HR director jobs is running total. Both as a permanent and as an interim, and I'm currently the interim HR director of a business called Cornwall Care down in the West Country. A few words about London HR Connection. We're a long-established professional networking group for everyone with interest in the world of HR. We've been around since the 1980s, so pretty long established. Our origins were within the CIPD. But we have an independent board, which I chair. We have 9 HR senior professionals on the board. In normal times, we're used to running live events with lots of great networking, lots of great content, good wines, canapes, but I'm afraid you have to supply your own this evening, unfortunately. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and our model is based on commercial sponsorship just to cover our costs. The slide that you can see in front of you, our current annual sponsors are drawn for a number of sectors across the HR industry. Okay, go to the next slide, please, Matt. So I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Our sponsor is Impulse, who are a leading employee engagement consultancy, headed by Matt Stevens, who's the CEO and founder of the organisation. Matt is joined by Bertie Tonks, Bertie, who is the Global Director of People and Culture at the Collinson Group, which is an international loyalty and benefits specialist organisation. Matt and Bertie have got lots of years of relevant experience in the field of employee engagement and also specific expertise in leading projects to increase engagement through wellbeing, which is a subject for today. So very much to hearing more about it, and without further ado, over to you, Matt. Fantastic.
Thanks, Craig. I was thinking that when you said Matt and Bertie, it sounded a little like a Saturday morning show. Maybe I'm a celebrity, you know, but anyway. Hey, listen, it's I'm too young for that, but I don't know what that means. I just say welcome and thanks for having us, Craig, and welcome to everyone who's joined. Great that you are part of this conversation. And just to reiterate from both Bertie and my perspective, forgive me for speaking for you, Bertie, but please do interact with us. It makes it so much more interesting for us as it does for you too. Yeah. Craig's going to keep us honest in terms of if there are questions coming in, because sometimes, because I've got the screen in front of me with the slides, it's hard to see. So just really briefly, a little bit about us. This is as salesy as I will get, I promise. But for us, we're very much about helping employees to be at their best more of the time. We do focus on the employee experience, engagement, and well-being. We've got some great clients from around the world, including Collinson. Quite a bit of our research and work features in different magazines, from HR News to Forbes. And I was really privileged to get published 2 years ago now by Lid Publishing around the engagement revolution. So that's it from me in terms of a little bit about Impulse. Just to set up the context, because I know Bertie, I'm going to introduce Bertie in a moment, get into the detail of Collinson, because really it's the story of what Collinson have been through over this last few months. And having journeyed with Bertie and Collinson it was probably about a month ago, Bertie, that I said, do you realize like what, I know it sounds crazy as a HR director, do you realize what you've achieved? Do you realize what you've gone through? And actually how you've led the organization? Because we were looking at all the stats and we were talking obviously to some of Bertie's team regularly. And I think, Bertie, to be fair, you were so focused. We were kind of just able to bring you up a little bit to go, actually, there's some amazing things that have happened that you and your team and the leaders have helped to drive and lead. So I want to get into that story. But just to give some context, we very much have been about employee experience engagement for many years, and over the last year or so moved into well-being. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of background of our philosophy, this is our approach to well-being. These are the factors that we think make up a well-being. We actually worked with a leading healthcare organization, one of the largest in the UK, with their psychotherapists to help us come up with this model. So it wasn't just us on our own. We very much collaborated as we do in a lot of things. And these are the different factors you can see here. And under each factor are a number of questions. And you see in the heart of it, though, is also about how people were feeling and the impact it was having on their performance, because the correlation between the three is kind of a part of the sort of overall approach to well-being. I hope I don't have to convince any of you that this is important, right? Because otherwise we're on the wrong webinar, I think. But I just want to make the point, there's so much evidence out there. And listen, really happy, email me after if you want evidence to convince your exec teams. But there really is an overwhelming body of evidence to go. Well-being and engagement make a huge impact on performance, and actually how they interact can be different. I'll just pick out one that said those who measure the impact of well-being programs, 72% said they improve engagement and 53% said they improve productivity. I think that was from Gartner. So huge amount of evidence, which is why we chose to focus on it, particularly during the pandemic. Last thing to say, because I just want to set this up because it will bring a bit of context, and then Bertie, I'm going to hand over to you. But we don't really believe in just the single annual survey, which still quite a lot of companies do, which is one survey once a year, often 80 questions. We're kind of like, that day is gone, and that's really what my book is about. And happy to argue with you if you feel that's necessary, or debate with you. But really the point I want to make is over this period, a lot of our clients have gone from biannually or even quarterly to monthly. And that's been really, really fascinating to see the shift. And we've had companies who swore they would never go more than biannually. And they said, Matt, you can try and convince me. We're happy at twice a year, and now at monthly. And they are so thrilled they are, because something that's really key is the trend data and the ability to react more quickly to the what's going on and what's happening. Some things just to be really clear about is who owns it and what's expected, but it means you can turn around and respond much more quickly to what's going on, which is similar to quarterly, but certainly in the pandemic, we were saying to people, you need to be looking at doing it more like monthly. So I set that up because, Bertie, you weren't a massive fan of surveys. Would that be fair to say, in the old approach? I think I've just lost you, Bertie. You've frozen right at that very moment. I'll give him a moment to come back, but to say, Bertie was very clear that he didn't think that was necessarily that surveying in the way that he had experienced before was the right way to do it. And he was worried about dozens and dozens of questions. He was worried about what they would do with data. And he was also worried that would anything happen with it. So, I think on that note, look at that. I actually felt like, you're on mute. I'll let you come off mute. I actually felt like Matt Hancock yesterday when Boris suddenly tripped out. There you go. Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in organizations driving big engagement programs, Matt. And I'm absolutely of the conclusion that they just don't work. The big survey approach, from my experience, delivers very, very little returns. It does make a company feel really good about itself, though. That's the good thing. But you spend so much time trying to push water up a hill and get participation, get your managers and leaders behind this, but ultimately the same thing happens. Very few people beyond a select normal, the people that you can rely on, really get behind this, and instead it's left to people and culture or HR to be seen to be driving it.
Yeah.
Which in my view really isn't where it needs to be. And I think that's why I do laugh to myself. We said it recently on a conversation together. I find it amazing that I'm here talking about surveys when actually that is the case. And I think one thing that I really love to do in our organization is focus on the employee experience.
Yeah. And
I think one of the things that the Impulse platform provides is a good experience around the digital experience in kind of participating in providing your views. And that is a bit of a promotion for Impulse, but that's why we partnered with you, because the digital experience is a real enabler for people to engage with this, I think, much more regularly.
I got asked, I just have to say this to you both, because you'll be into this. I got asked recently, how do we increase response rates? And one of my answers was, well, stop doing 80 questions and do 10. You might find that response rates go up. And make the filling out the survey much more interesting and you know, and the question more interesting. But listen, Bertie, I wanted to tell us about the business. So tell us a bit about Collinson. It's global. Craig introduced you a little bit, but just give us a feel for it.
Yeah. Great, I will do. So, and my connection keeps dropping off very unusually today. So, Collinson, just over 2,000 people, 22 countries around the world. We're highly matrixed, highly complex in terms of our structure, maybe familiar to many. We are specialists in global loyalty and benefits programs. So, for example, we work with over 600 banks around the world, particularly specialising in FS, but more broadly. We have got a bunch of insurance businesses, we run loyalty programs, but most of you will probably know us from the work that we're leading in the UK and internationally at the moment around the airport testing, which is very much a pivot from our normal business activity to figure out how we can use our strengths to get us through this difficult period. For example, to give you an insight on that and the challenges we face, 80%-ish of our revenue comes from airport lounges. So we're the global leader in airport lounges, and it doesn't take much to figure out that the bottom has definitely fallen out of that market for the time being.
I'll tell you what, they're very exclusive places now though, Bertie.
Well, yeah, very empty.
Yeah.
But it won't be that way forever. Yeah. I think about the impact of COVID on our business. It's been really significant from a revenue perspective, but you know, even in my team alone, the people and culture team in the UK, I think I've got about 22 people. 6 people have lost 7 loved ones to COVID.
Wow.
And I'm talking about mothers, fathers, brothers, really, really close. So very early on, the human impact, even to my team, the very people who are driving the people experience through this period, has been really, really significant. So we're also very aware that I'm lucky. I'm sitting in a nice kitchen. I've got quite a bit of space. It feels great. But the reality is that not everyone has that. I'm very aware of people that are working in a really kind of closet type environment where it's quite claustrophobic, and actually where they might not have windows. They might be working off their bed predominantly. Kids running around. We all know, right? This is something that we've all been working through this time. But I think one of the things that I was very conscious of early on as we hit COVID was when people are sat at their desks, or even when they're doing flexi work, and you've got some insight into how people are feeling, what's going on for them, the pressures that they might be facing. And in many respects, your colleagues can pick up on those little signs and be the ones to lift you up and pull you through the tougher times. But it really became quite startling to me when I started to consider, actually, how can we get inside the living rooms, the bedrooms, the kitchens of our people to understand what our responsibility was to do for people and culture, to ensure that we held their hand, we provided them with the level of support that we needed to be able to get through this period and beyond. Because ultimately, in my mind and that of my teams, everything we do right now will stand the test of time. Did we stand up? Were we true to our values, our sense of purpose?
Yeah.
Now is not the time to throw those things out the window, but to figure out how we can bolster that and make people feel and believe that we were always authentic about that stuff. And that's not just about making sure people feel good, that we, you know, there's only an extent to which we can relieve their stresses, etc. But actually about how much we care for them and how much we need them to focus on every day, waking up with a really clear sense of purpose and focus to drive as much value as they can from the boardroom to the broom cupboard through their efforts.
Yeah.
So sorry, Matt, go on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Bertie, I think it's a great point, and Craig, I'm sure you've seen this too. This was a defining moment for companies to go, do our values matter, or are they literally just on the wall? And I'll give you one example. I can't name them, but a global investment bank who'd spent a year telling everyone how they're going to listen more. And then this has happened. They went to the employees. The employees said, we want to work from home. And they said, no, we're going to be doing, still coming to the office once it came out of the first lockdown. And so there was uproar because people went, hang on, you've spent a year telling us all it's now about listening to you and being inclusive and listening to your voice. And then when they gave it and said, actually, we want to stay working from home, they kind of dismissed it. So,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and so when I decided to introduce monthly surveys and move from the annual approach, you know, I was met with a bit of criticism, a bit of pushback, because of course the rhetoric was, we can't get people to complete annual surveys, Bertie. Why on earth do you think we're going to be able to do that on a monthly basis? And also we've got work to do. You know, we've got fewer, leaner resources than we've ever had. The pressure actually is more immense than it's ever been for many reasons. Let alone the psychological effects of not being able to engage with people more directly face to face. But we persevered. I'm really pleased we did, and I'm really looking forward to today's session to sharing some of the things that we did, some of the stories, and make sure that what all of our listeners today come away with is some real tangible examples of things that you can do as takeaways, partly from the lessons learned from our own journey and some of the support that you've provided through the way, Matt.
Yeah.
Can I just interject with a question here? We've got, it's very personal to what you were saying, Bertie. We've had a question from Louise Rowe, who basically said that her organisation went to fortnightly surveys about a year ago, but the engagement numbers really dropped off as a result, and people just experiencing survey fatigue. Is that something that you experience, and you have strategies to deal with that?
So I haven't really experienced that. I've got to be honest, and part of it, and we will go through some of the more detail around this, is that the survey wasn't the be all and end all. I think what was more important was what we did with the results. And traditionally, we focused on engagement, and the engagement in more traditional survey terms has been less around well-being. And what we made the decision actually through Matt's guidance was, actually, why don't we focus on well-being at the moment? Focus on the person. Let's get to the very bottom of that. And for me, I think actually that's been one of the most transformational changes that we've made in terms of how we're driving our activity. So I rarely, when it comes to the monthly surveys, beat a drum. So I don't do very much to promote it at all. Yeah. Instead, we use the results and the activity that we're driving as a result of what people are telling us to almost speak for themselves.
I think just to briefly add to that, a couple of things. One is context matters, right? So when you're going through a global pandemic and no one has a flipping clue what's going to happen the next week, doing regular surveys is just a good idea, right? Because you want to listen and find out. In normal times, we wouldn't necessarily say monthly. We'd probably be more around quarterly, because we'd say, actually, the context has changed again. Things aren't shifting quite as quickly. And so about a 3-monthly cycle is probably about right. That tend to be in normal times where we land. And then you're right, Bertie, about the reason we said well-being is because it was always a factor within engagement, but it was kind of lower down the factors. And it was so clear it was becoming an overriding. And I would say there was a clear correlation, which we'll show in a moment, between well-being and engagement. And so we were like, actually, we've got to drive engagement through focusing actually on well-being, which is just to bring us on, Bertie, here, because I'll speak for you, and then because you can take the plaudits for this, right? Because there's hard yards behind this, and this is what I want you to share, really, Bertie, is what did you do? Because it wasn't. I have no issue with you saying the survey is not the be all and end all. You're spot on. What the issue is, what you do with the results. That's the critical bit. And that's really why we're doing this webinar, to go, here's some of what we did. But to kind of give the story, and then please jump in. You know, the well-being index that I highlighted, all the factors, went from 62 to 70 over, I think it was April to, I think it's the end of September or October, as it is, which is great. So it went up in actually pretty tough times. The other thing is, people say, how do you keep people engaged in it? Well, through the survey, once people have completed it, it actually tells them, it gives them some information about their own well-being. So we have 3 bands, green, amber, and red. And then everyone puts, each company decides what they share about, hey, you're in the green band, that means this, etc. But you can see there massive increase in the green band from 46, which was actually pretty low, up to 61. And the key is getting the red band, which is you're actually really in not a good place, from a well-being perspective, from 17 to 12% over that. And then the correlation, which, because we asked this engagement question in the well-being survey about how people were feeling about their working there, went from 45 to 62. So you can see, by working on the well-being, there's no doubt you could see engagement was going up. And you've made this point, Bertie, about steady response rate. So
yeah, and actually, I'm now getting some of our leadership team saying we want to do a bigger engagement survey beyond well-being. And my approach has changed quite significantly, which is, we're only now going to do that if you and your leadership team are willing to drive the change and stand behind it. Because in the meantime, with our limited resources, this gives us the difference to make a difference. It gives us the information that we need. If you want to do more, if you want to do deeper, again, we're not going to push at closed doors anymore.
Yeah. And just say, I would agree with Stella. I think what employees value has changed. I just saw that come up. I think there's no doubt, we can see from our evidence, well-being has gone up as a more significant, more influential factor within engagement, which is why we now have more of a focus on it. Just something as well, I think, for people to know, and Bertie, you've been really kind to share this with us. Sorry, my son's is trying to get me. I did say to them all, I'm on a webinar till 6, leave me alone, don't come in. Rocks up, sorry. It was that we actually asked people as well, one of the questions separate to the well-being was about addressing some of the key issues. And there's no doubt within your data, because we see, obviously, you've got lots of clients, that you're one of a few who had communication coming out at the very top. And again, there's a clear correlation between shifting how people are feeling, shifting the well-being, and the engagement, by actually focused on this constant communication.
Yeah, and you know, it's in every survey since days of old, I'm not paid, my salary isn't at the right level, and communication are the 2 areas that come out often, kind of in some of the weaker areas for a lot of organizations. So, and I think we're not too dissimilar to that, if I'm really honest, pre-COVID. So I do think there's a lot of really good stuff that's come out of the COVID environment, and certainly a lot to learn from.
Just tell us, Billy, because you did, just while we're at this point, what were some of the changes in communication? Because I'm just thinking of people listening. Because I know you worked with your 2 CEOs and.
Yeah, so we've done an awful lot around the CEO. We created personalities from the CEOs. We've got joint CEOs. They're 2 brothers, which is quite interesting. But they're great guys. Passionately believe in the company, and definitely passionately believe in our people. But what we wanted to do was to create a platform whereby where monthly platform, we could do a CEO vlog. I know a lot of people do that at first. Not really pro that. Well, what if we've not really got very much to talk about? What if there's only negative things to talk about, given we're making cuts and salary cuts, bonus cuts, redundancies? We've had 2 rounds of those now so far. But actually, you know, we've had conversations, I've had emails directly from them saying, actually, do you know what? Thanks for making us look good. So our role was to make sure that they continue that engagement, that connection with people. But in addition to that, we've introduced other things around communication, such as a monthly people managers call. It doesn't sound very much, but this is for managers, run by managers, not run by leaders. So it's the topics that they want to see delivered by managers that are, you know, in the thick of the fire, and doing their best to kind of put them out. So that has been a real powerhouse for around communication. But I think most importantly, it's been taking the stories, it's been taking and sharing the stories from right across the organization in every pocket, no matter where that might be around the world, and making sure that we get those stories out there. They are the stories that they're the hero moments. They're the storytelling around the fight, overcoming adversity, celebrations, the dark times that people might be facing into. And it's being really honest and authentic about that. I think historically we might have gotten to a point where we said, let's not share that story. That's a bit dark. And, you know, we don't want to bring people down. But actually, those are things that really resonate because people can see themselves in some of those. Sorry, Craig.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask you, on this chart, you've got obviously the top three there. Was there an equivalent bottom three that you weren't doing so well
on? Well, what's interesting is as I don't know how much data you've got to share here today, but what's interesting is we've made positive improvements in nearly all of our dimensions, as you can see here.
Okay.
So there are the bottom ones, but these are things that were bottom way before we came into COVID. And I think it is important to recognize that everybody's starting position is different. So there were things that we were doing really well before coming into COVID and as you can see, there are things such as I feel secure about my financial situation. Well, in the backdrop of 2 rounds of redundancies, pay cuts, furloughs, it's hardly surprising. And as we go through, I've got some really good examples, I think, of things that we've done to really impact those elements, things that I think in normal times we might have looked at and said, well, there's nothing we can do about that. Unfortunately, it's really tough, but we can't make any long-term promises here, right? So, but we have got some practical examples to walk you through today. Rather than focus on the low things, I think what we decided to do actually was every single month was to focus on what are the 3 things that are most important to our people. And that's that concept of small incremental changes and you know, very quick listening and reaction has enabled us to help transform our journey, I think.
Yeah. I would just add to the anonymous question about 62% engagement is below the norm. Well, number one, I'm not a great fan of Best Companies factors, but I won't go into that because that's their competitor. What I will say is, yeah, based on what context. So I can tell you in our context with all our clients from March to November, the average engagement score has been 56% because it's not been a great year. So actually they are above for the context we're in and for the context we're going on globally. So engagement has fallen across all our clients and is lower than it was last year. We can see that quite clearly. And these guys were slightly above. So I'm just going to move on. I don't want to, because Bertie, you said to me, a lot of people have sort of summed this up very well, but around all the pressures, but some of the key problems.
Well, I think the one that I would like to just pull out actually, and I've thought about this a lot through COVID. If you think about good old Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the bottom 2 layers, and I know that's been discredited by many, as every model that we know has, right? But if we just take that at face value and say there's got to be some validity in it, at the very foundation of that is psychological and safety needs. Well, if you think about what we're going through COVID, that if we consider that's the very foundations of what it's like to be human, they're being challenged. Our job security, our roof over our head, you know, these things are being challenged very significantly as we head through this time, and this very much is linked to well-being. People right now are battle worn. They've had enough. Where's the signs that we go that we're going to come through this quickly? You know, we're going 1 step forward, we're having to go 2 steps back. And so, whilst it's great that we've got the vaccine is now going to be available, it's still going to be quite some time till we come through this, and people have got to endure this time. We're battle worn, I think, is the key thing I want to pull out here, Matt.
Yeah, and just hot off the press to add to what you're saying, we've just pulled together our latest data, and on the financial security question, so I feel secure about my financial future, this is for all the companies, talking in terms of employees, hundreds of thousands. It's gone from averagely 64% over all the companies down to 40 in March, down to 47% at the end of October. So the point is, people, I know, and so that's including the vaccine for the last 2-3 weeks, the commentary around that. People are actually seeing the mood music. They're seeing that corporates, like you're saying, Bertie, are going to be making redundancies, all those classic words, right sizing, and all those kind of things. So they can see that for their future, whilst growth might be on the horizon, April, May, beyond, actually the next 6 months don't look good at all. That's coming through the surveys very, very clearly, and as yours.
We had a question on that actually from Alex Wilson, said that once the vaccine comes out, are we going to just forget about all this well-being stuff and then we'll just go back to focusing on growth and the financial drivers of the business? Is that a risk?
Well, do you know what? It's funny that. So I've been talking to my leadership team recently. We've made loads of cuts in the people and culture team as well. Now is the time, I think, even if it might be another 6 months, I think HR needs to get really, really seriously focused on what that ramp up looks like. Most of us have made lots of cuts. Some of those have been people that we didn't want to lose. We will all put our hands up and say we've managed to deal with some of our problems that have probably been going on for quite some time, years in some areas, around underperformance, as well as genuine, we're just having to make cuts. So we are leaner and stronger now as businesses, arguably than we have ever been. In many cases, perhaps overly lean. And what we need to do as we ramp up, I think, is prepare ourselves to make sure that we only let the best of the best back into our organizations. And when they're in, that we've got the best frameworks to engage and retain them possible. This is an opportunity for us to create a real genuine reset on our businesses, its performance and the culture. And I think HR can't wait till the ramp up starts. We have to start that now. And this is a great platform to commence that journey in my mind.
I would say, Craig, I don't know, I'll let you know how the leaders respond. Being honest, because some of them I haven't got much faith in, if I'm honest. And some I think have had a Damascusian, however you say it, sort of conversion. To actually recognize it does matter to focus, and this is part of really what you were saying, Bertie, around focusing on well-being, making that a priority, surveying monthly has really, through very difficult times, you're saying 2 rounds of redundancies, your business falling off a cliff because of what it's about, and yet actually taking people with you and keeping them engaged. So do you want me to just move on? There you go. So I'll let you pick, and these are just for help people to sort of, well, another thing we'll go through each one, but it's really for you to talk about what have you done to help those listening.
Yeah, great. So I think before we came into COVID, we were doing lots of stuff, lots of work around strengthening our D&I agenda, for example. And I had some challenges in the business. The introductions of same-sex toilets. I had some challenges around the importance of this stuff and the value that it was really driving. It was a bit woolly for some. It was a bit ethereal for some. However passionately I might have believed that this was going to add real value. What we know from the engagement from the Pulse surveys, the little and often, is that instead of the voice coming just from me, the voice around what's important is coming through the strength of the survey, and we're able to play that back much more readily. I mean, we focus a lot on using regular insights to almost like as levers to very quickly understand what are the levers for our culture. And the next month we'll know whether or not we've made a difference, because the results will change inevitably. But also I think it's the insight that we get. If I think about 1 month when we started this, I remember it came through that in our China office, that they were saying, actually, I just feel really disconnected. We're feeling, and there was a trend that people were feeling quite down. Well, it enabled me to make some spot calls just out of the blue. And I remember speaking to one of our people who was working in this little cupboard, and bless her, without a word of a lie, she had a sheet of wrapping paper on a little tiny desk. that it was there intentionally to cheer her up when she got to work every day. Now, I think it's really important, this regular insight, that leaders take it upon themselves to go beyond what the survey is telling us. This points us in the right direction, but to go beyond that and personally be bothered and interested in understanding and jumping into that person's environment. So I got a few people in China to show me with the laptops, show me where you work, so that when I'm designing activity and support mechanisms for you, and when I'm communicating you, I've got a better understanding of who I'm doing that to, and the different environment that you're operating in. That's just a very small example.
And I think, Bertie, just to add to that, something you've done very well, and I'd encourage everyone listening is, and it was difficult. So there's an honest conversation to have here, which is you were worried about the agility, a favorite word of 2020, but you were worried about the agility of managers to adapt to the monthly. Would they use the data? Would they have the conversations? And it'd be good just to speak to this power up managers, with what you did there.
Yeah, well, some of what I've been using is actually external data and some of our partnerships. So we partner with a company around that specializes in supporting domestic abuse, for example. So, we've got data around that. Combining the data around that is quite powerful. So 1 in 4 women have experienced domestic abuse, 1 in 6 men. Now this data is a very useful extra layer to bring into your organizations when you're trying to get your managers and your leaders behind the messaging and the importance of driving activity more regularly. So what most of you will know, when it comes to traditional planning of any kind of project type activity, we create the most beautiful and well laid out of plans, but the reality is they're dead the moment we write them. The works of Cotter and other great management thinkers and researchers through the years have shown us that most projects fail, and the reason for that is we're very rigid, what we call more of a waterfall approach to getting things done, instead of more of an agile kind of methodology. So we focus less on big plans, much more on small incremental changes that we're convinced are going to make a bigger difference. So again, what we do every month is just we take literally the top 3 things that are coming out on our survey that people are saying are important. Now there's loads of other stuff. I can't get to that. I can't get to the loads of other things. I can't, and I think this is where the engagement surveys tend to go wrong, is we try to be all things to all people. Instead of just taking the biggest 3 problems that you've got, it's and making sure that you absolutely smash them.
Yeah. And I think that's something that came out very clearly, watching you from a little bit of a distance is, I was really pleased you took the approach of the 3, because I think focus is very, very important. And again, without naming names, we work with a number of companies who've had a bit of division because they've had so many sort of visions, we're going to do this, and then, it just goes off. The other thing I'd give some feedback for people listening is we've also seen that that a number of surveys across a number of clients show that actually the employees were overwhelmed by the number of initiatives that the company were coming up with and going, we've now got this, and we've put this database on, and you can go and get any video you want from this on exercise. And it was almost actually what employees were looking for, and you've kind of made reference to this, Bertie, is my manager knows how I feel and knows about my well-being, and she is talking with me and helping me, as opposed to there's 40 initiatives come from on high.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give you a simple example. So another simple example. Through our surveys for the first few months, first 3 to 3, 4, 5 months, one thing that was coming out was our managers and our leaders were saying, we're at every leadership meeting, we can't do any more. Like we've got fewer resources. The demands and pressures are great. We're working longer evenings and earlier mornings, and yet our results were showing that 30% of our people were saying every day I don't wake up with a clear sense of purpose and focus. So our managers and leaders saying we can't do any more. You can't squeeze any more blood out of a stone. And I was saying, Well, how comes 30% of our people then don't have that clear sense of purpose and focus every day? Imagine the opportunity that we have if we can give that to them. Because actually, that's our job as leaders and managers. It's not something we do when we've got time. So if ever there was an opportunity, a lever, it was that. And that was a great bit of data, really small, but really powerful bit of data that I continue to bash through our organization. I say bash through because you have to be really honest about this stuff. And I think the other thing that the other role that we play in HR is we got to be prepared to be challenging on this. We've got to challenge ourselves, make sure that we're practicing what we preach, but we've got to go out there and have really honest, full frontal conversations with our people as much as we do our leadership teams. Because culture, which is what we're talking about, belongs to all of us. It's not just on us. And I won't lie, I've still got some barriers that we're still trying to break through on that. Things are not perfect at Collinson. We still have huge challenges. I'm just proud of the journey so far.
Yeah. I think. Sorry, Craig, I'll let you go.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to a question which I think is probably good to bring up just now. So I appreciate you saying you focus on the top 3 issues, and that creates a real sense of purpose and focus and things that you can do and show that you can do it. So there's a question here from Louise Rowe, which is, the downside of that anything else that comes up is just felt to be ignored. Do you clearly show, you said we did, so are you showing a clear response trail to the issues raised?
Yeah, I mean, so what we're talking about here are things beyond the fires that are burning, that keep coming up every day as a result of a business that's under stress. So, cuts, redundancies, all of that kind of stuff, making sure that we're being as efficient around our processes. So all of that activity continues to happen, and we have to respond to that. We can't leave it. But I think what we try and do is create velocity, is the word that I use, around our activity. Right, we've had this bit of feedback. We need to move really quickly now to make sure that we're making a difference. In the pre-COVID, we used to spend a lot of time saying, you've spoken, we're going to now work on this and we're going to deliver this for you. And we set all sorts of wrong expectations in that. What we tend to do now, and it is quite a shift for us, and it has only happened almost accidentally, I guess, to some extent through COVID, as well as the advice from Matt, is instead of creating the signposts, we very quickly create the velocity around delivering some really tangible things that people can see, touch, and feel. And then we say, we did that because of you, because of what you said. But we no longer say, this is what we're going to do because because of what you told us. We do a retrospective only, and that's really, really important to us now, because we want people to believe in our messaging. And what we're hearing is actually that is starting to make quite a difference.
I think the other thing I'd just say to that question is, because it's a fair one, is around the empowering of managers to have more of those local conversations. So for me, Louise, what Bertie's talking about, you're right, is sort of from a company perspective, here are the 3 things. But there was an absolute expectation, Bertie, I know, because I think we support you a little bit with managers to go, you need to be sharing back, because they've got their own dashboard on the platform to be able to say, look, I can see what my local team's issues are, and I need to have those conversations.
Yeah, so beyond the people and culture team, we have people in every single location who are passionate about this stuff and doing the right thing by our people, as we call it. And they're not champions, they don't have an official role, but we share and engage with them as soon as we get new data in. And then we do what I tend to call is we swarm around our problems across our business, and we do that a lot within our agile teams now within people and culture. But right across the business, where we've identified any problems or challenges, we get like-minded people around those problems. We look at it and say, what are we going to do that's going to make a genuine difference? And then we go our own ways. And there's a bit that comes from the center, but there's a lot that comes more from within each of our business areas. The challenge is we can't create too many new programs of work. Everyone's busy, including the people and culture team. So it has to be it's not shying away from responsibilities, minimum effort, maximum impact in many respects.
Definitely.
One of the slides you had on the previous slide was about bolstering people development. And there's a question Michael Moran would like to hear more about that in terms of what you did.
Yeah, great. I'd love to. So in some of the leadership meetings early on, as we were in COVID, some of the conversations were around, well, we've got to keep up productivity, and we're a values-based, purpose-driven organization. We just are. Not everyone believes in that, but more and more people are reporting to. So what we were trying to do was to really ensure that we were what I describe focus on the whole person. Now, some tangible examples of what that means is, given financial security was something that was coming out as a top 3 very often, that wasn't just because people were fearful of their own jobs. It's because their loved ones were losing their jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there were 2 incomes perhaps in a household, or their son had lost their job and they were worried about, or daughter worried about their futures. So we introduced a program which is specifically for the loved ones of Collinson. Little effort, if I'm really honest. It's almost like an internally run outplacement. So it's interview skills, CV building, LinkedIn masterclass, and really importantly, positive psychology. How can you wake up every day with a positive mindset? We introduce growth mindset workshops throughout the business, focus on how can, even in the challenging times that we all might be going through, how can you think about how I continue to grow and build a more positive life and future for myself, my team, and my business going forward. We introduced another example, and again, it was fairly cheap to do given the impact that this had, but a free financial coaching service for our people. So this was an online portal that we bought into. People then had the ability to still have the ability to be able to register their name independently and confidentially just amongst that service, and they get up to 2 free sessions where they can talk about how to better manage their credit cards or their mortgages or their debts. And if these are worries that people bring into the everyday workplace, why wouldn't we try and help clear people's mind of these things? Because you can't turn it off when work begins.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't we focus on the whole person in that respect, and support them? But we've also introduced a whole range of programs through our learning and development offerings around remote working competencies, how you build teams remotely, for individuals around, if you don't quite get it, how to maximize that, how to make sure that every day you're showing someone quite actively the kind of value that you bring every day. The importance of connecting with your team, even people that you wouldn't ordinarily connect with, to let them know that you're there for them. So that's I mean, I could go on, but that's a few kind of some of the top examples.
Do you think that COVID has changed our views on leadership capabilities and competences as a result? Do you think it's bringing new skills to the fore?
Yeah, Matt, would you want to go first? Do you want happy for me to just jump in? Because I will, unless you've got...
No, you go, and then
absolutely, I do, Craig. Absolutely. I think we're quite a contemporary organisation, but there are still people who used to, presenteeism. So if someone's not sat at their seat, I'm not sure they're really working. The reality is you might have gone past that person and they're looking at YouTube or they're on Yahoo or so I'd like to think that actually in terms of our flexible working practices it's forced us, and I'm going to put a number on it, it's forced us ahead 10 years, I'd say, in terms of that evolutionary journey that we were on across organisations. I think we've adapted well to it. HR's got a new challenge coming up, which is focused around this re-ramp up planning, which is around how do we move back to an organisation that's more balanced, taking the best and leaving the rest of the practices that we've experienced and the growth that we've experienced in our mindsets through this period. And a lot of that is on leadership, the importance of leadership to be very visible, to make sure they're actively connecting, again, even when it doesn't feel like there's very much to connect with. And for managers to really own the relationships with their people. we've never got there. I don't think we're certainly still not there in Collinson. There are lots of people who still aren't doing this stuff well, but there's a greater appreciation for the power and importance of it.
That's an amazing positive benefit coming out of the pandemic then, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, look, I'll just very briefly add, I think the role of the line manager, right, in my 20 years, sadly to say 20 years now, corporate experience, like the line manager's always been like this mythical kind of, we'll solve all the problems, the magic bullet, and there's a truth to that, right? But what I would say is the understanding that they actually need to take care of themselves is something certainly we've been pushing to say, look, it's the cliche, and some might have seen the slides that have done the rounds of, when you're on a plane and it goes into emergency, they actually say put your own mask on first before you put it on others. And whilst it may be cliched, it's true. You do need to go, have we got people in the right place who are healthy and whole and playing from a 10, playing at their best? Because if you get that, everything else just flows. So I think we've been working with a number of companies around, including Collinson, how do we help line managers be their best selves first and actually think about themselves? Because if they get that right, they will generally be better with others.
And I've learned, I think that's a really great point, Matt. And I've learned a lot through this as well as a senior HR practitioner, is I spent many years pushing hard at managers to do their job around people. And actually, I think I'm probably going to focus less on that going forward. Now, I don't think the importance of that is any less than it ever was. But instead, I think I'm going to use things like, which I've started to use, things like quarterly reviews, because we killed off the annual appraisals just prior to COVID. And we just have quarterly reviews. Now what I do is I show dashboards, and I don't have to say very much, because if I show dashboards, I let the leadership conversations play out. I see the leaders with the worst results quickly defend themselves. I see them do that once. I see them do it twice. I see a more challenging conversation coming from their colleagues, not from me, when that happens more regularly. When I see that 60% of their team have got objectives, when I see that 70% have done quarterly reviews, when the rest of us are doing this. So I think what one of the lessons for me around that is around leadership and management, and how we transform our approach in people and culture and HR is, if we're pushing at these closed doors, and after all these years, the results still aren't the results that we want still aren't happening, it's time for us to think about how we revolutionize our approach to getting different set of results than what we used to. And that's one of the key ways for me, is around the leaderboard type approach around data, whether that's wellness, whether that's performance related, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, everyone would say this, I think, on the webinar, but if you've got one side, the sort of task orientated leader, and the other side, people orientated, there's always been a battle. But I think COVID hopefully has tipped the scales and gone, it's people stupid, and even, excuse me, if I think about from a supplier perspective, talking and meeting new people, it's amazing because you're in their living room now, you're in their kitchen, and again, that's been well said, but it really does change the dynamic from impulses. They're just so oh, hey, you're Matt, oh, and I can see, oh, sorry, there's a child just walked in, oh, the dog's jumped up on my lap, whatever it might be. Those stories have changed things. The question is, how do we keep that going into the future? Because it's much more human, it's much more real, it's much more like normal day life, where you're generally a bit nicer to people than sometimes you can be at work. Yeah.
Do you, just on that, I mean, this is a question that Stella raised, actually. Are we clear as to what well-being means these days? Has the meaning been influenced and changed during the COVID pandemic? And I suppose as a follow-up question is that reflected in the way in which your surveys are designed? So are you clear as to which questions would constitute well-being versus engagement, for example, or how does that work?
Yeah, so to answer that clearly, yes, we've got the 7 factors of well-being that we developed with the healthcare company, very much looking at today and now, what do we think constitute those factors? So it is more than, what people might have thought. So it involves financial, it involves self-awareness, it involves body. So yeah, they've been well factored. It involves mindset. Bertie talked about sort of, can people think positive thoughts? So we ask those, do you have the ability to recognize when you're thinking negatively and change it? Because that's a key part of well-being, the ability to do that. And unfortunately, we all know people who don't. They get on a track in their mind and they stay pretty negative. So managing that, yes, and how that differs from other factors within engagement, like leadership, because engagement really is the outcome. So you talk about there's leadership factor within engagement. There's the line manner factor. There's the purpose, mission, and vision factors. So yeah, I think there is a differentiation. And really, my point, I'll hand over to Bertie, but is that well-being, it was a bit like this kind of cool sort of thing, and wellness, and hey, about 2 years ago, even a year ago, and then suddenly COVID has brought it in as a very important factor, much more than it probably was a year ago.
Yeah. And again, I talked about the work we do with the domestic abuse charity. Well, actually, the place of work, we wanted to close down our offices. It was like, COVID's hit, let's lock down restrictions, close the offices. Then we found out that actually the office played a really key role in providing a place of refuge for some people for very different reasons, literally a place of refuge. And I think it's really important to recognize that importance. The other thing about what I really like about the focus on wellness, Craig, is that the questions aren't divisive. So they don't sound divisive. It's not what we're not trying to do is, do you really love us? How much do you really care about us as an organization? Do you really have a strong connection with us? Do you really admire your managers and your leaders? It's about them. And I described it as the whole person, but it takes them in themselves rather than it's outward looking in rather than inward looking out to the world. And on that basis, you tend to get a much more emotional and therefore honest and raw response. I was on the train probably about 2 months into COVID, coming home, and we stopped on the way to Cambridgeshire, and the train driver said, I'm really sorry, up ahead someone is trying to commit suicide, but fortunately they've been stopped. And he said, do you know what, I have to say that this used to be a weekly sometimes and a monthly occurrence. This happens multiple lines on this track every day, and a lot of people are successful. And that really, really resonated with me. It was kind of like, actually, our duty of care here is massive. It's not just about the loyalty, the commitment, the motivation of our people now and into the future, but this is about people's lives. At the end of this food chain of our organization, that's there about making money, they're about driving a greater sense of purpose. At the end of that food chain is people. And if we genuinely care about our people, then we care about the lives of those people, which is why a lot of the examples that I've shared today kind of extend beyond that. Now, what I really love about the non-divisive kind of nature of some of the questions, a lot of the questions that we ask, is also about the platform itself. It's actually, I talked earlier on about the experience, it's a fun experience to complete the survey platform. You move things around in terms of whether or not something's important to you, and you play around with thermometers, and so it doesn't feel like a piece of corporate activity. And that's Matt. I appreciate that is promoting your platform, but there's an emotional experience that people have when they're doing that's very much aligned to the outcomes that we're looking to drive.
Yeah, and I would just add it, and I'd love to take the credit, but it's not mine actually. It's the company we work with to develop the wellbeing. Is they said just what you said, Bertie. This has to be about them, and therefore at the end of the survey, they have to get some results about them. And for anyone listening, I think that's so important. Whoever you use, make sure that at the end of filling out a wellbeing survey, it actually gives the participant, how am I doing? I've just answered the questions. I want to know, where am I? Am I okay? And we've had lots of feedback from employees at Collinson and many others saying, I actually really love my monthly check-in. to kind of go, look, it's my honest moment with myself to go, how am I doing? Where am I struggling?
There were 2 months, Matt, where my personal report showed me at the end of it, because you get the immediate view across the organisation, but I get a personal report showing whether I'm red, amber, green at the moment.
Yeah.
And there were 2 months through COVID where I was red. And I remember saying to my wife, blimey, I'm red. And she said, of course you're red. Of course you're red. And I was like, what do you mean? But I'm always smiling. You hear me at work. I'm always engaging. Of course you're red. She said, you're like a wound up spring. She said, and you know what? I just went, and it sounds very pathetic, but like most of the great HR practitioners, and a huge kudos to everyone on the call, because we've been through a lot, and it's definitely been our time to show our businesses what we've been through. So congratulations for the journey so far to everybody. But there was, after that time that I talked to my wife, I sat there and I had a cry. I don't cry about.
We lost him at a crucial moment.
I
think
You've gone, Bertie.
I think he's gone. Just to say for anyone listening, there's like a little caveat, which is every company puts the advice alongside some psychotherapy advice to people, depending on what band they're in. So they obviously connect them to videos, phone numbers, line managers, etc. So it's not just that you're a red, unlucky. it's
over to you.
Lots of links and actual advice of what to do, and then same for amber and same even for green. So yeah.
Do you think that therefore there's been a real shift in what employees are looking for in terms of support from their organisations for wellbeing, and do you think that's going to be a long-term sustainable trend?
Yeah. Sorry, Bertie's back. I love that, Bertie. You said I cried, and then you cried,
and then you left.
You left us hanging.
Yeah, sorry. I love a cliffhanger. The point was there is I realised that I felt like I'd had enough, and I hadn't seen it in myself until my wife very nicely pointed out. And I had a moment there. It was just a sense of release. Actually, it was like, yeah. And if I'm worried about other people, going to your point about.
I think we've lost you again. I think the self-awareness piece is so critical going through a period like COVID, you know, that we all think we're aware of ourselves and what's going on, but sometimes just having some external reference point can really help. You asked me a question, Greg. Sorry, forgive me. What?
Yeah, so those are the questions about, do you think expectations of employees of their organisation has shifted? So they expect to have more direct support in terms of their well-being. And do you think that's just a COVID thing, or do you think that's a fundamental change in the so-called new normal?
I'm going to be honest with you, Craig. I'm nervous. I'm nervous that it's not going to be kept because we're going in, and I'm seeing some poor behaviours from some leaders that we're working with that are going back into that classic, well, we're in recession, well, it's cost cutting. And so I am nervous that we're not going to see some of the wins about actually recognizing we're all human and we're all individual and our needs are different, and therefore, you know, let's reflect that in the way that we lead people. Some of those wins that have been happening because of COVID, no doubt, have been lost. Like I can't say who, but I spoke to a leader recently who went, I had no idea where half my people even lived. I didn't even think, like, I had no thought about what home they went to. I had no idea if they were going to a 1-bed flat, if they were going to a 5-bed detached. And I mean, you know, he was being really honest with me, but he said, oh my goodness, like how, this is like my senior leadership team. And I had no idea. Now, most people weren't going back to a 1-bed flat, or if they were, it was on the coast. But actually, he said, I just didn't know what their experiences were, or even their family. He's like, I suddenly found out, actually, you know, the gran had got COVID, and like, I didn't know that their gran was still alive. It's like, there's just so much we've learned about one another that I hope isn't lost. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, on one of the open questions, sorry, I dropped off again. On one of the open questions, it did come through one time that someone actually put, I'm having trouble with my marriage. And I won't go into the full message, but it was a really, and I didn't know who it was. Yeah. We couldn't find out who it was. Yeah. So in the end, what we did was we took that bit of data, because it's and I did a video, just a very quick video on workplace platform to say, I know this is really tough for some of you. I know some of you, whether it's your relationships or your whatever your worries. And we had a team of people trained up around the world to be able to respond to this. And we gave contact numbers. And someone's contacted me about another problem altogether, not so much their relationship, more about their relationship with their parents and not being able to see them through these times and the impact that that's had on them. But we have to take a responsibility to create channels for people to be able to offload and connect and just discuss their worries, because believe it or not everyone has a really good friend or family network from which to draw on.
Yeah,
very sad.
It's good. I think in terms of sort of sharing content, I think we're probably, that's so I don't know if there's any other questions, Craig.
Yeah, there's a few questions. One of them is more of a kind of strategic question, I guess. It's about using data. This is Keith Robson. To shape the agenda for other business challenges. So obviously, a lot of companies have used employee surveys historically to shape, help shape or inform their business strategy. Obviously, there's a bit of a danger at the moment. We might just focus on getting us through the COVID pandemic. So I suppose the question is, at Collinson or in other organisations, are surveys still being used to inform longer-term strategy?
The reality is at Collinson at the moment, we have a long-term strategy still. I expect the people and culture strategy to shift considerably when we get back to that and think about stop putting out the fires, as I've said. But data's got to play a really important part, very, very important part of that. I think what we'll have a much clearer idea around is, as a result of this period, is our management and leadership capabilities, the elements of our culture that are strong and future-proof, and also a really good understanding of actually where we've just not got it right. And I think now is not the time, in my mind, for our organisation to be driving that strategic thinking, because we're in survival mode at the moment. That's us as a business. I know not everyone's there, but again, whilst we're in survival mode, we have to think about the longevity of our decision making now and the impact that decisions on how we treat people now and how we drive exceptional performance more efficiently. How we do that is more important as we go forward than ever. I definitely think data will continue to increase in terms of its importance on informing strategy. The only caveat I would say is move to a more agile approach. Instead of waiting for creating those long, huge plans, they're going to be out of date the moment they're written, or the context, the changing world. We're facing economic, political, societal, and natural disasters right now, right across the world, and that's not likely to change. So when we've got our people strategies in a good place, let's just make sure that they're resilient and capable enough of being able to adapt to the changing environment. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, look, very briefly, just add, we're seeing two camps. One, as Bertie said, is companies who are literally surviving. I won't share, but the industries that are really struggling, and we're definitely seeing it's a more month to month, and that's about using data for that, and just kind of how do we keep people going, whether it's well-being, engagement. What I would say though is we are working with a number of companies who we're now actively encouraging them, and they are doing future of work surveys. So they're very much getting the employee voice into, okay, we do think we can see a clearer view over the next few years. So let's get your input, down to things like how often do you want to work in the offices? Would you like regional offices or even town offices? Would you like passes for your, whatever it might be that's more local? And then additional to that, and this is quite exciting, we're seeing changing what it means to be engaged at our workplace because their strategy is changing. So the company strategy and what they're focused on. Actually, quite a number, and Bertie, you speak to this, but quite a lot of companies have innovated and change their strategy quite significantly, certainly with some of the ones we're working with. And so therefore, with a new business strategy, it does actually, it's right time then to look and go, so what does it mean to be engaged here at this organization based on this being the new business strategy, which is the right thing. You should keep reflecting and looking at, are the questions we're asking the right ones for the context we're in?
Yeah, and I think that the big question around what are the, given that work can be anywhere now, I mean, because we do ask some of the questions now, Matt, we've transitioned into asking questions around how many of you want to work in the office, how many of you want to work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days at home, and it's really insightful, because then it stops the leadership team saying, well, of course people want to be in the office. So we know that people want actually a better balance.
Hybrid,
Pardon?
Hybrid,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
we have a great open question here on the list from Rob, which is, what's the best thing you've learned in 2020? I guess there's been a lot of learnings along the way.
Good one. I've learned that, and I think I already knew this, but it's been confirmed. So here's a confirmation that whatever time you're investing in the development, motivation, and alignment of our own HR teams, it's probably not enough. I used to feel guilty about the amount of time I invested in that stuff with my own team, because I think in the little on one side of my shoulder, but Bertie, there's a whole organization out there that you should be spending more time with, engaging and driving great work. Actually, I think the reason we're coming through this pretty well from a people and culture team perspective is not how we've handled this situation. It's because we spent 2 years developing our team to be ready for this. So I don't think you can underestimate the amount of effort that we need to focus on our own team. That's one thing. And the other thing is just that I've mentioned it already for me, which is if you're trying to convince everybody, in particular our managers and our leaders, that doing the very things that we know are good management and leadership practices, if you're trying to do that and you're not breaking through, then stop running at the door the same way. Time to think about a different approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. Probably at the time, just a couple more questions. I want to, this is probably more a question for Matt, really. This is from Fraser Butters. Companies who are actually doing really well, thriving, is there any correlation between what they're doing on wellbeing and engagement and their business success? Can you see any links when you look across your customer base?
Yeah, it's not deeply data analyzed, so I don't want to pretend it is, but certainly at a sort of reasonable level of correlation, not causation, we can see some correlations between the companies who are getting pretty high well-being and engagement scores and seem to be coming through this. And in truth, and I can think of 2 in my head right now, who haven't leaned into engagement and well-being. The 1 or 2 survey they've done over the 9 months have been pretty dire, and they're really, really struggling. And that was against our advice. That was against some of their own internal people's advice. So it's a little bit that I am also going to add to that. There's a little bit about industry, as we all know. So it depends where you're coming from as well. One thing, Craig, I would say, just going back to that previous question about what have you learned? I've learned that even the most introverted people I know are social beings. You know, that we are at heart social beings, and we as much as I love this 2D, we want to be 3D. We want to go down the pub. We want to have a friend round. We want to be able to have a chat and meet up. And I think I hope we never forget that, you know, that being social is a really important part of what it is to be human.
Certainly agree with that. Interesting one here from Chris Thorne about the requirement for employers to report their annual report on what they're doing about well-being. How have you seen that work in practice? Is it just a tick box, or is it companies are actually reporting real, strong initiatives in these areas?
Well, certainly for us, we'd like to think we're reporting strong initiatives, and as Matt said at the very beginning of this, I didn't actually realise we had, because I wasn't deeply looking at the data super deeply in terms of throughout the whole period of COVID. But I think, you know, certainly for us, I think it's really important what we put in the annual report, and we should be able to talk about that honestly in terms of the challenges we were looking to address, what we did to head into those, and the impact of it. And I think companies should be in a position right now to be able to, if not now, then I do urge people to get on it pretty quickly to be able to demonstrate how we've helped through this period.
I'd just add to that. And you're right, Bertie, by the way, trend data is a key, and I think hopefully that's come across to people, and that's what we're able to do for you. Two things. I would say up until this year, I'm going to be a bit harsh. I think it was a little bit trendy, and wellness and well-being. So it was like, hey, look at the rewards we've got. Aren't we cool? Hey, man, you can have a duvet day. Think about your wellness. And you go, come on, seriously. I actually really believe now, and I'm unashamedly going to say this, you know, this because it's in our model. People are now realizing well-being is about people's emotions. It's about their financial. It's about, you know, some real tangible, earthy things that will make a difference about their mindsets. Things we cover off. It does include physical health. That matters. Are they getting enough sleep? Are they doing enough physical exercise? So, without scaring anyone, I think companies are going to have to get a little bit more into some of that stuff, when maybe they might have shied away and gone, no, it's more about these fun, funky, you know, things that we can offer. No, actually, it's about some really earthy things that will make a real difference.
Yeah.
And I have to say, and Craig, for our listeners today, you know, I'm all about open sourcing and sharing information and ideas or things that we've done, even if that's kind of slide decks, or because I think actually it's this is more of a, sounds like a call to grace, but it's a humanity issue here that we're talking about, as I said. And I think anything we can do across our community of amazing HR practitioners to share stories, examples of work, or, you know, policies or presentations that might help, you know, the more we can do that, the more we're just helping people, and the more actually I think we're really showing that our attempts to strengthen our organizations is not just because it's our profession. It's a selfless act looking to better our businesses, support our people, but also just to make this world a better place to be able to get through some of the horrible challenges that we're all facing into.
That's a great offer. Thank you for that, Bertie.
Yeah.
I just want to pick up on, I guess this is also for you, Bertie, Alex Wilson's question here. Training for leaders specifically around how they cope with this situation. Did you do it, and was it prompted by specific feedback you got via surveys?
Yeah, so we, again with this, because we literally decimated my team in the early days of this, in the first round of redundancies, let alone the second. So we've gone where the energy is. So we've said, what we did is we listened to the feedback, very quickly put together some programs, and we've added to that every month pretty much. But then what we've said is, this is available if you or your teams want to get involved in this. You have to let us know. We're not just going to put this stuff on. Let us know. And what we found is that teams or individuals have actually come to us. So we know that we're addressing those people where, generally speaking, that have the greatest need or desire. The challenge, of course, is getting out to those people who aren't speaking up, who aren't willing to put their face or their name outside of the survey results. So it's just, what else can we as an organization do to make sure, for those people that don't like to show themselves, to give them still some resources that they can access to be able to help them, even if that's kind of more self-guided. And I have to say, a lot of the things we're talking about today, if I was to show you the budget that it's taken to deliver these things, it wouldn't have 4 noughts in. It wouldn't have 4 numbers in, sorry. So this is all low budget, cheap as chips activity, but actually more focused around driving meaning in our activity. So this isn't, do not be fall into thinking that you need big budgets, big teams to be able to do this.
That's good to hear.
My people development team is 2 people now.
That's very good to hear. So we don't have any other questions on the Q&A tab at the moment. So we're getting closer to 6 o'clock. So before I wrap up, did you want to make any final points, either of you?
I'll let Matt go first if you want to, Matt.
Thanks, Bertie. Yeah, look, firstly, thanks to everyone for staying on. I think it's been good engagement, hopefully, all the way through based on the number of questions and people who've stayed with us. So that's great. I really appreciate that. I think a couple of things just to say is getting the trend data, I'm going to come back to that, is so important. So I don't care who you use, right? Well, I do a bit, but seriously, go and make sure you're working with someone who's going to help you get that trend data, because that, as we've seen even with COVID and the nightly sort of updates, it matters, and it helps you then make informed decisions about the things you should do. And I would say right now to anyone listening, a focus on well-being should remain very high. So don't be looking to move off too quickly into some other form of, let's get back to actually engagement and well-being together, still a really, really important, or well-being being a key part of engagement over probably the next 3 to 6 months should remain. So I'd really encourage you to do that.
Thanks, Matt. It's not too late. So we are 9 months into this COVID thing, but it's not too late to start driving activity around this area. If you're sitting there feeling a little bit guilty because you've not done enough, you could have done more to support your people, now's the time to start. We're still going to be in this for quite some time. Your people still need supporting. And interestingly, whilst we're talking about the whole person and people, you know what? We're talking here about driving business performance. We just don't need to mention that quite so much. Your people come in, clear sense of purpose, focus, they're feeling better about themselves. They feel that as an organization, you're giving that extra to support their personal circumstances that they're going through, personally or otherwise. You're going to get more commitment, loyalty from that person, and a stronger connection with that person than you could have ever done by driving traditional employee engagement surveys. So I think that's a big takeaway that I'd like everyone to kind of go away from my perspective today. Just there's a big opportunity ahead. Whatever you do, start to think about what that ramp up looks like beyond COVID, but don't throw well-being out of the window, because I still see that as a really powerful key when we move into more of a blended working environment.
Thank you very much. Okay, Matt, did you want to cover this final slide with contact? You've got some contact details and some links.
Yeah, I was going to say, join London HR Connection. That was my plug for you guys. Good webinar.
Thank you very much.
They only run the best, and they only get the best on, right?
Absolutely. I live and die by that.
Thank you, Craig, for hosting us and offering us the opportunity to come on and speak about this. I hope it has helped people. I really love what Bertie said, and it speaks to the character and the man that he is, saying contact him if you want any support, ideas. And I've certainly found Bertie to be like that beyond being a partner with him on Impulse. So we wanted to put on here, I think the slide's going to be sent out by someone, whoever that is, that these slides will be sent out.
Do that.
Yeah. Just put on, obviously, our website you can go to, and you can book to meet someone and all the rest. And then LinkedIn for Bertie, so you can message him and connect, and also for myself if you just want to do that generally, and obviously then London HR Connection.
Great. Craig, can I ask, we'll send you a slightly different version of the deck to share out, because I've got a version which actually captures a lot of the specific examples around what we've done. Okay. So I think that would be more useful for your listeners, because they'll have a little bit more of some practical takeaways that are listed.
Yeah. Sounds perfect.
We'll get
thank you
tomorrow. Yeah.
Great. So all remains for me to say is lots of thanks to Matt and to Bertie. Really interesting session. Got lots of questions coming through, and hopefully you enjoyed our participation. We're getting a lot of feedback on the chat, which I'm sure you're looking at, guys. So that's very, very positive. And please do follow up with Matt and Bertie as you wish. So just to say, we're now taking a Christmas break from London HR Connection to see us through to the new year. We've had 3 webinars this month, so we've